The morning light filters through the dusty blinds of my kitchen window, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. I sit at the same oak table where Margaret and I shared 32 years of breakfasts, where we planned our dreams and weathered our storms. Now, it's just me, the silence, and the ghosts of better times. The house feels too big these days. Every room echoes with memories I can't quite let go of, yet can't fully embrace either. Margaret's reading glasses still sit on the nightstand, her bookmark still marking page 247 of a romance novel she'll never finish. Her coffee mug, the one with the faded "World's Best Mom" that David gave her when he was 8, remains in the same spot in the cabinet where she left it 3 years ago. 3 years. Has it really been that long? I take a sip of my black coffee, bitter and strong, the way I've learned to like it since Margaret's passing. She always said I drank it too weak, adding cream and sugar like I was afraid of the real taste. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was afraid of a lot of things back then. The garage door creaks as I push it open, the familiar smell of motor oil and sawdust greeting me like an old friend. This has become my sanctuary, my escape from the emptiness of the house. Here, surrounded by my tools and half-finished projects, I can pretend that life still has purpose. The workbench Margaret bought me for my 50th birthday stretches along the far wall, cluttered with wrenches, screwdrivers, and the remnants of various repair jobs that keep my hands busy and my mind occupied. I run my fingers along the smooth handle of my father's hammer, inherited when he passed 20 years ago. He was a carpenter, a man who built things with his hands and took pride in honest work. He would have understood this feeling, this sense of being forgotten, overlooked by those you've sacrificed everything for. David used to love coming out here when he was young. I remember teaching him how to hold a screwdriver properly, how to measure twice and cut once. His small hands would struggle with tools too big for him, but his determination was fierce. We built a treehouse together when he was 12. Nothing fancy, just a platform with walls and a roof. But he was so proud of it. We worked every weekend for 2 months, Margaret bringing us lemonade and sandwiches, complaining about the sawdust we tracked into her clean house. That treehouse is still standing, weathered and abandoned now, visible from the kitchen window. Sometimes I catch myself looking at it, wondering when exactly everything started to fall apart. David graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern, landed a job at a prestigious consulting firm in Chicago. Margaret was so proud she cried at his graduation, kept his diploma on the mantelpiece until the day she died. He moved into a downtown condo, started wearing $1,000 suits, driving cars that cost more than I made in 2 years. Success, by every measure that matters in this world. But success has a way of changing people, doesn't it? The son who once spent hours in this garage with me, who called every Sunday without fail, who brought his college girlfriends home for Margaret's famous pot roast dinners, slowly became someone else. Someone who was always too busy, too important, too sophisticated for his old man and his middle-class life. The visits became less frequent after Margaret's diagnosis. Oh, he came for the big moments, the hospital stays, the funeral, but the easy warmth between us had cooled to polite obligation. Conversations became stilted, filled with his work achievements and my careful questions about his life, a life that seemed increasingly foreign to me. I walked to the window that overlooks the lake behind our property. Margaret and I bought this house partly for this view, the way the morning mist rises off the water, the way the sunset paints everything golden in the evening. We used to talk about fixing up the old dock, maybe getting a small boat for weekend fishing trips. Another dream deferred, another plan that died with her. The lake house sits empty now, has been for years. We built it as a weekend retreat when David was in high school, thinking it would be a place where he could bring his friends, where we could have family gatherings. It needs work. The roof leaks, the deck is rotting in places, the windows need replacing. But it's still beautiful in its way, still holds the promise of what it could be. David used to love that place. He learned to swim in that lake, caught his first fish off that dock. His senior year, he had a girlfriend, Sarah, I think her name was, and they would spend entire weekends out there. Margaret would pack them a cooler full of food and pretend she didn't know they were drinking beer. "Young love," she'd say with a wistful smile. "Let them have their romance." I wonder if he even remembers those times now. The mailbox at the end of our gravel driveway is the same one I installed when we moved in 35 years ago. Sturdy, reliable, built to last. I painted it fresh white every few years, kept the numbers visible and clean. Margaret used to tease me about my obsession with that mailbox. Said I treated it like a shrine, but it represented something to me. Permanence, belonging, the idea that this place was ours. These days, the mail is mostly bills and advertisements. David calls occasionally, usually when he needs something or has news to share. His conversations are efficient, businesslike. He tells me about his promotion, his new apartment, his travels for work. I tell him about the weather, the neighbors, sometimes mention a repair project. We dance around the growing distance between us, both pretending it's normal, both knowing it's not. Margaret worried about this before she died. In her final weeks, when the pain medication made her philosophical, she would talk about David, about how he seemed to be pulling away from us. "He's building walls," she said one afternoon as we sat on the back porch watching the lake. "I'm afraid he'll keep building them until we can't reach him anymore." I assured her it was just his career, his new life in the city. "Young men need to establish themselves," I told her. "He'll come around." But in my heart, I wondered if she was right. The Sunday dinners stopped first, then the random phone calls, then the visits became appointments, scheduled and brief. He developed a habit of checking his phone constantly when he was here, as if being in his childhood home was an inconvenience to be endured rather than a comfort to be enjoyed. I tried to bridge the gap, tried to show interest in his world. I asked about his work, his friends, his plans, but my questions seemed to annoy him, as if I was prying into matters beyond my understanding. When I offered advice, the kind of practical wisdom that comes from living 6 decades in this world, he would smile politely and change the subject. The garage has become my confessional, the place where I admit truths I can't voice anywhere else. Margaret understood this about me, knew that I worked through problems with my hands, that the rhythm of sanding or hammering helped me think. She would leave me alone out here when I was troubled, bringing me a beer or a sandwich without comment, respecting my need to process things in my own way. I pick up a piece of oak I've been working on, part of a rocking chair I'm building for no particular reason. The wood is smooth under my fingers, shaped by hours of careful attention. There's honesty in this work, in taking raw material and creating something useful, something beautiful. It's the kind of honesty I sometimes feel is missing from other parts of my life. David visited last month unannounced, which was unusual for him. He seemed agitated, kept pacing around the living room like he was looking for something he'd lost. When I asked what was wrong, he launched into a complicated story about office politics and difficult clients. I listened, nodded at appropriate moments, but I could tell he wasn't really talking to me. He was talking at me, using me as a sounding board for thoughts he couldn't organize elsewhere. When he left, he hugged me briefly at the door, the kind of obligatory embrace that felt more like a handshake. "Take care of yourself, Dad," he said, and I heard something in his voice. Not affection exactly, but not indifference either. Something in between, something I couldn't quite identify. The evenings are the hardest. When the sun sets behind the trees and the house settles into its quiet routine, I feel Margaret's absence most acutely. We used to sit on the back porch after dinner, watching the water and planning tomorrow's small adventures. She would read while I whittled or worked on some small project, comfortable in our shared silence. Now I sit alone, surrounded by the accumulated debris of a lifetime. Photo albums Margaret organized so meticulously. The wedding china we use twice a year. The good silverware saved for special occasions that came less and less frequently. All the artifacts of a marriage, of a family, waiting for someone who cares enough to claim them. Sometimes I imagine what will happen to all this when I'm gone. Will David want any of it? Will he see value in his mother's hope chest, his grandfather's tools, the thousands of small treasures that represent our family's history? Or will he hire someone to haul it all away, eager to close this chapter of his life and move on to more important things? The thought keeps me awake some nights, not the dying part. That's just biology, inevitable and uncontrollable. But the idea that everything Margaret and I built together, everything we saved and cherished and passed down, might end up in a dumpster because it doesn't fit into his sophisticated new life. I've started making lists lately, trying to organize things so they'll be easier to deal with when the time comes. The important documents are in a folder in my desk drawer. The insurance policies are clearly marked. The deed to the house, the title to the car, the information about my pension. Everything neat and orderly, the way Margaret would have wanted it. But what about the intangible things? The story of how we met at a church social dance, how she laughed when I stepped on her toes, the way she hummed while she cooked, always slightly off key but with such joy that it didn't matter. The morning she told me she was pregnant with David, how we sat at this same kitchen table and cried with happiness. These stories live only in my memory now. When I'm gone, they'll disappear too, unless David wants to hear them, unless he cares enough to ask. The phone rings occasionally, old friends checking in, neighbors with questions about something in the yard. I appreciate their concern, but I can hear the careful tone in their voices, the way people talk to someone they consider fragile. Since Margaret died, I've become the widower, the elderly man who lives alone, the one people worry about but don't quite know how to help. David's success has made him somewhat of a celebrity in our small community. People ask about him at the grocery store, at the post office, at church functions I still attend out of habit rather than faith. "How's your son doing?" they ask with genuine interest. "We saw his picture in the business section of the paper. You must be so proud." And I am proud, in my way, proud that he achieved what he set out to achieve, that he succeeded by the world's standards. But I'm also confused by how that success has seemed to require him to distance himself from where he came from the people who shaped him. Margaret used to say that success without family is just expensive loneliness. I think she was right. The rocking chair is taking shape slowly. Each piece must be fitted carefully, joined with precision and patience. There's no rushing this kind of work. You measure, cut, sand, test the fit. If it's wrong, you start over. If it's right, you move to the next step. The chair will be strong or it will be worthless. There's no middle ground. Relationships are like that too, I've come to understand. They require the same patience, the same attention to detail. But unlike woodworking, you can't start over when you make a mistake. You have to live with the imperfections, work around them, hope they don't compromise the whole structure. I wonder if David and I have accumulated too many imperfections, if our relationship has been damaged beyond repair by years of small misunderstandings and missed opportunities, or if there's still time to sand away the rough edges, to strengthen the joints that have grown loose over time. The lake reflects the fading light as evening approaches. Somewhere in the city, David is probably working late, reviewing contracts or preparing presentations, building his career one 60-hour week at a time. Does he ever think about this place? Does he remember the summers we spent fishing, the weekends we worked on projects together, the quiet satisfaction of building something with your hands? Or has he moved so far into his new world that this one seems quaint and irrelevant, a relic from a simpler time he's outgrown? I turn off the garage light and head inside. The house waits, patient and familiar, filled with 35 years of memories. Tomorrow will bring another day of small routines, minor repairs, careful solitude. And maybe, just maybe, it will bring an opportunity to bridge the distance that has grown between my son and me. But tonight, like most nights, I sit at the kitchen table where Margaret and I shared so many meals, where we raised a son who has become a stranger, and I wonder if love is enough to overcome the walls that success can build around a man's heart. Outside, the treehouse catches the last rays of sunlight, still standing after all these years, still waiting for someone to remember why it was built. The mailbox flag is up when I return from my morning walk around the lake. It's become a ritual these past few years, 40 minutes of quiet contemplation, watching the mist rise off the water, listening to the birds wake up the world. Margaret used to worry about me walking alone at my age, but now there's no one left to worry. I flip through the usual collection of bills and advertisements, sorting them automatically as I walk up the gravel driveway. Electric bill, property tax notice, credit card offers I'll never use. Then my fingers stop on an envelope that makes my breath catch. Elegant cream-colored paper, formal script addressing. The return address shows David's name, but not just his name. Mr. and Mrs. David Franklin Harrison, embossed in gold lettering. My son has gotten married or is about to, and I'm learning about it from a piece of mail. My hands shake slightly as I turn the envelope over, running my thumb along the wax seal. When did David become the kind of person who uses wax seals? When did he become someone who would send his father a wedding invitation, like a distant relative or casual acquaintance? I sit heavily on the porch steps, the same steps where Margaret and I used to snap green beans on summer evenings. The envelope feels heavier than it should, weighted with implications I'm not ready to process. Part of me wants to tear it open immediately. Part of me wants to throw it in the trash and pretend it never arrived. The seal breaks with a soft crack. Inside, the invitation is even more formal than the envelope suggested. Heavy cardstock, raised lettering, the kind of expensive stationery that announces its cost without stating a price. Mr. and Mrs. Robert Harrison request the honor of your presence at the marriage of their son, David Franklin Harrison, to Miss Catherine Elizabeth Winters. I read it twice before the words fully register. Mr. and Mrs. Robert Harrison. Not Robert Harrison and the late Margaret Harrison. Not Robert Harrison, father of the groom. Just a generic, impersonal reference that could apply to anyone. But it's the guest list that stops my heart entirely. The invitation is addressed to the Harrison family, as if I'm not David's father, but merely a representative of some larger entity. As if I'm interchangeable with any other Harrison who might happen to receive this elegant summons. My name appears nowhere on the invitation. Nowhere. I sit there on the porch steps, holding this piece of paper that represents my son's most important day, and I realize I've been erased. Not forgotten. Erased. There's a difference. Forgetting is an accident. Erasing is intentional. The wedding is in 6 weeks. Chicago, of course. The Drake Hotel, which even I know is the kind of place where people like David get married. Black tie optional, which means required for anyone who doesn't want to look out of place. Reception to follow. I try to imagine myself there, surrounded by David's colleagues and Catherine's family. I've met Catherine exactly once when David brought her home for a brief visit last Christmas. She was polite, well-educated, appropriately impressed by David's success. She called me Mr. Harrison the entire time, despite my invitations to call me Bob or Dad or anything less formal. She and David spent most of the visit on their phones, managing their important lives from my unfashionable living room. The thought of walking into that wedding, knowing that I'm the afterthought guest, the obligation invite, makes my stomach clench with humiliation. I can picture the conversations. Oh, that's David's father. Yes, he still lives in that little house by the lake. Quite the contrast, isn't it? I fold the invitation carefully and slip it back into the envelope. My hands are steadier now, but my mind is racing. This isn't an oversight. This isn't David being thoughtless or busy. This is deliberate. The house feels different when I walk inside, as if the air itself has changed. I pour myself a cup of coffee and sit at the kitchen table, staring at the invitation. Somewhere in Chicago, David is planning the most important day of his life, and he's doing it without any thought of the man who raised him, who paid for his education, who taught him how to ride a bike and throw a baseball and change a tire. Margaret's voice echoes in my memory. He's building walls. She saw this coming years before I was willing to admit it. She saw the way David looked at us in his final years of college, the subtle embarrassment when his sophisticated friends met his middle-class parents. She saw how he started editing his stories about home, leaving out the parts that didn't fit his new image. The phone rings, startling me from my thoughts. For a moment, I hope it's David, calling to explain, to apologize, to say there was some mistake with the printing. But it's only Mrs. Patterson from next door, asking if I can help her with a stuck garage door. Of course, Helen, I tell her, grateful for the distraction. I'll be right over. Mrs. Patterson is 83 and has lived next door for as long as we've been here. She and Margaret were close friends, sharing recipes and gossip over the back fence for decades. Since Margaret's death, she's appointed herself my unofficial caretaker, bringing me casseroles I don't need and inviting me to church functions I don't want to attend. Her garage door is an easy fix, just needs some oil on the tracks and adjustment of the tension spring. But as I work, she chatters about neighborhood news, and eventually the conversation turns to David. I haven't seen that son of yours in ages, she says, handing me a wrench I don't need. How's he doing in that big city? Fine, I say, focusing on the mechanical problem rather than meeting her eyes. Busy with work. I'll bet he is. Margaret was always so proud of how well he was doing. A fancy consulting job, wasn't it? Yes. And I heard he's been seeing someone serious. A lawyer, right? Or was it a doctor? Something like that. The garage door slides up smoothly now. Problem solved. If only everything were so simple. Helen walks me to the property line, still talking. You know, Bob, Margaret always said David would do something special with his life. She just knew it. That boy is going places, she'd say. He's got ambition. She was right, wasn't she? I nod and make appropriate noises, but Helen's innocent praise feels like salt in an open wound. Yes, David has gone places. So far that he can't see where he came from anymore. Back in my own house, I find myself looking at old photo albums, something I haven't done since Margaret's funeral. Here's David at age 5, missing his front teeth, grinning as he shows off a fish he caught. Here he is at 8, covered in sawdust after helping me build a bookshelf. High school graduation, college orientation, various holidays and birthdays captured on film. In every picture, he looks happy. Not just happy, he looks like he belongs here, like this house and these people are his foundation, his safe harbor. When did that change? When did we become something he needed to escape from rather than return to? The evening news is full of stories I can't concentrate on. Wars and politics and economic reports that seem to belong to someone else's world. I eat a sandwich for dinner, standing at the kitchen counter, looking out at the lake. The water is calm tonight, reflecting the darkening sky like a mirror. I keep thinking about the invitation, about the careful way my name was omitted. It wasn't an accident. Someone, David, Catherine, or both, made a conscious decision to exclude me from the formal recognition of this event. I'm welcome to attend, apparently, but not to be acknowledged as having any special significance. The phone rings again around 9 o'clock. This time, it is David. Hey, Dad, did you get our invitation? His voice is casual, cheerful, as if nothing unusual has happened, as if he hasn't just delivered the deepest cut of my life wrapped in expensive stationery. I got it, I say carefully. Great. So you can make it, right? I know it's a bit of a drive to Chicago, but we're hoping everyone can be there. Everyone. As if I'm part of a crowd rather than his father. The Drake Hotel looks nice, I say, testing the waters. Catherine insisted on it. Her family has connections there, so we got a good rate. Plus, it's convenient for most of the guests. A lot of people are flying in from the East Coast. I wait for him to mention the elephant in the room, the fact that my name appears nowhere on his wedding invitation. But he doesn't. He talks about the menu, the band, the honeymoon plans. All the details of a life I'm apparently peripheral to. David, I finally interrupt. I notice something about the invitation. A pause. What about it? My name isn't on it. Another pause, longer this time. Dad, I don't understand what you mean. But his tone tells me he understands perfectly. He's hoping I'll let it slide, pretend I didn't notice, maintain the polite fiction that this was somehow accidental. The invitation lists Mr. and Mrs. Robert Harrison as hosts, I say slowly. But your mother has been dead for 3 years. Oh, that. Relief in his voice, as if this is a simple misunderstanding. That's just traditional wording, Dad. The printer said it's standard for formal invitations. Standard. Right, it doesn't mean anything personal. It's just how these things are done. I sit in the growing darkness of my living room, holding the phone, trying to process this explanation. David has reduced the erasure of my identity to a printing convention. My dead wife gets billing as co-host, but I remain invisible. I see, I say finally. So you'll be there? I can help you find a hotel if you need one. Somewhere near the Drake, but maybe a little less expensive. I'll let you know. Okay, great. Listen, Dad, I have to run. Catherine and I are meeting with the caterer tonight to finalize some details. But I'm glad you got the invitation. It's going to be a great day. He hangs up before I can respond, leaving me alone with the dial tone and the bitter taste of dismissal. I sit in my chair, Margaret's chair really, the one she claimed as hers 30 years ago, and try to understand what just happened. David has planned his wedding without consulting me, sent me an invitation that doesn't acknowledge my existence, and when confronted about it, explained it away as a technicality. The rational part of my mind wants to give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he really doesn't understand how the invitation reads. Maybe Catherine's family is handling the arrangements and he's just going along with their preferences. Maybe I'm being oversensitive, looking for slights where none were intended. but the rational part of my mind is being overwhelmed by a deeper, more primitive response. I feel like an animal that's been kicked by someone it trusted. The pain is sharp and immediate, but it's the betrayal that cuts deepest. I walk out to the garage, needing the comfort of familiar tools and unfinished projects. The rocking chair sits where I left it, waiting for my attention. I run my hands over the smooth armrests, feeling the grain of the wood, the slight imperfections that give it character. This chair will be strong because every joint has been carefully fitted, every piece selected for its quality. It will last for generations because it's been built with patience and attention to detail. It will outlive me, probably outlive David too. But who will want it when I'm gone? Who will appreciate the hours of work it represents, the skill required to shape raw wood into something beautiful and functional? Will David see any value in it, or will it just be another item to dispose of when he settles my estate? The tools hanging on the pegboard are organized exactly the way my father taught me, sorted by function, maintained in perfect condition, ready for use. Each one has a purpose, a specific job it was designed to do. Remove any one of them, and the others can't fully compensate for its absence. Families are supposed to work the same way. Each member has a role, a contribution to make to the whole. But David has decided that my role is expendable, that the family unit can function just fine without acknowledging my participation. I pick up a chisel and test its edge against my thumb. Still sharp, still ready to do its job, even if no one needs it anymore. The lake is invisible in the darkness now, but I can hear it lapping against the shore. The sound is constant, reliable, unchanging. It was here before we built this house, and it will be here long after the house crumbles and returns to the earth. There's comfort in that permanence, that indifference to human drama. Margaret would know what to do about this situation. She had a gift for understanding people's motivations, for seeing through surface explanations to underlying truths. She would have known whether David's explanation was genuine confusion or deliberate evasion. She would have known how to respond without making things worse. But Margaret is gone, and I'm left to navigate this alone. I lock up the garage and head inside. Tomorrow I'll need to make a decision about the wedding, attend and pretend nothing is wrong, stay home and miss my son's most important day, confront David more directly about what feels like a systematic attempt to minimize my significance in his life. For now, I sit at the kitchen table where Margaret and I shared so many conversations, where we planned David's future and dreamed about grandchildren we might never see. The invitation lies open in front of me, elegant and formal and empty of any acknowledgement that I matter. Outside, the wind picks up, rattling the windows and reminding me how alone I am in this house that once echoed with laughter and argument and all the messy vitality of family life. Now, there's just silence, and the sound of my own breathing and the growing certainty that something fundamental has shifted between my son and me, something that can't be explained away as a printing convention or a social tradition or an innocent oversight. Something that demands a response. 3 days have passed since David's phone call, and I haven't been able to shake the feeling that I'm living in someone else's life. The invitation sits on my kitchen table like an accusation, growing more insulting each time I look at it. I've read it so many times I could recite it from memory, each word carved deeper into my consciousness with every reading. This morning, I find myself in the garage again, but not to work. I'm standing here surrounded by the accumulated evidence of a lifetime spent building things, fixing things, making things better. The irony isn't lost on me. I can repair almost anything except the relationship with my own son. The pegboard where I keep my tools tells its own story. Each tool hangs in its designated spot, outlined in black marker so I'll know immediately if something is missing. Margaret used to tease me about this obsession with organization, but she understood it too. Your father needs his systems, she'd tell David when he was young. It's how he makes sense of the world. David used to understand that too. I remember the summer he turned 14 when I taught him how to use each tool properly. He was impatient at first, wanted to jump straight to the fun part without learning the fundamentals. But I made him practice basic techniques for weeks before I'd let him work on anything important. Measure twice, cut once, I'd tell him, watching as he carefully marked his measurements. Take your time, do it right the first time. He learned. God, how he learned. By the end of that summer, he could use a dovetail saw better than most grown men. His hands were steady, his eye was true, and he took genuine pride in creating something beautiful from raw materials. We built a jewelry box for his mother that August. Nothing fancy, just a simple design with clean lines and a smooth finish. Margaret kept her wedding ring in it after she got too sick to wear it anymore. I wonder if David remembers that summer. I wonder if he remembers the satisfaction on his face when we fitted the last piece into place. When the lid closed with that perfect soft click that meant everything was aligned exactly right. I wonder if he remembers how we stood there together, father and son, admiring our work and planning the next project. Probably not. Success has a way of editing your personal history, keeping only the parts that fit your current narrative. The David who lives in that Chicago high-rise probably doesn't want to remember the boy who spent his summer vacation learning to sand wood until his arms ached. I pull out the step stool and climb up to reach the top shelf, where I keep the projects I'm most proud of. The jewelry box is there, returned to me after Margaret's funeral. David cleaned out her dresser with efficient thoroughness, sorting through 40 years of accumulated treasures like an estate sale appraiser. He handed me the box without comment, probably didn't even remember that we'd made it together. The wood is still beautiful, cherry that's aged to a deep, rich amber. The joints are tight, the finish unmarred by time. It's the kind of work that lasts, that gets better with age instead of falling apart. I run my fingers over the surface, feeling the slight texture left by the final sanding, remembering David's concentration as he worked the grain in long, smooth strokes. "Why are we spending so much time on sanding, Dad?" he'd asked. "Nobody's going to see the inside of the box." "You'll see it," I told him. "Every time your mother opens this box, you'll know whether you did your best work or just good enough work. Which one do you want to live with?" He chose best work that summer. I taught him the difference, and he chose to do things right even when nobody else would notice. When did that change? When did he start choosing good enough over best? When did appearances become more important than substance? The garage door rumbles open, and I realize I've been standing here holding the jewelry box for 20 minutes, lost in memories that seem more real than the present. Mrs. Patterson's grandson Jake waves at me from his car as he backs out of her driveway. He's home from college for the summer, helping his grandmother with yard work and repairs I used to handle. Jake reminds me of David at that age, ambitious, impatient, convinced he knows more than the old folks around him. But there's a kindness in Jake that I'm not sure David ever possessed, a genuine affection for his grandmother that goes beyond obligation. He calls her Granny without embarrassment, hugs her goodbye every time he leaves, listens to her stories with a apparent interest. I wave back and wonder what makes the difference. Why does one young man embrace his roots while another discards them like outgrown clothes? Is it character, or circumstance, or just the random distribution of human nature? The afternoon sun slants through the garage windows, illuminating dust motes that dance in the air like tiny spirits. This place holds 40 years of my life. The projects I've completed, the problems I've solved, the quiet satisfaction of work done well. But it also holds the ghosts of dreams deferred, plans abandoned, hopes that never materialized. The boat motor in the corner was supposed to power weekend fishing trips with David. I spent 3 months rebuilding it, replacing parts, cleaning carburetor jets, making sure it would run perfectly when we finally got that boat. But David was in college by then, home only for brief visits, always too busy to spend a day on the water with his old man. The motor still runs like new, but the boat never came, and now the lake feels too big for one person. I should sell the motor. I should sell a lot of things. The house is full of possessions that made sense when I had a family, when I could imagine passing them down or sharing them with grandchildren who might appreciate their value. Now, they're just reminders of a future that's evaporating one disappointment at a time. But I can't bring myself to let them go. Each tool, each project, each carefully preserved piece of family history represents hope that somehow, someday, David will remember who he used to be, that he'll remember the boy who was proud to work beside his father, who understood that real satisfaction comes from creating something meaningful with your own hands. The phone rings inside the house, and I jog to catch it before the answering machine picks up. It's David again, but his voice is different this time, businesslike, efficient, the tone he probably uses with clients. "Dad, I've been thinking about our conversation the other day, and I wanted to clear something up." I don't respond, Just wait for him to continue. About the invitation wording, I talked to Catherine, and she explained how formal wedding invitations work. The traditional format lists the hosts, which are usually the parents of the bride and groom. Since she's not with us anymore, the printer suggested using the traditional format to avoid confusion. Confusion about what? Well, if we'd listed just you as the host, people might wonder about mom, whether you were divorced or what happened. This way, it's clear that we're honoring both parents in the traditional way. I sit down at the kitchen table, looking at the invitation again. The lies come so smoothly now, wrapped in explanations that almost make sense until you examine them closely. Like a piece of furniture made from particle board and veneer. It looks good until you try to put any weight on it. David, your mother's name is listed as Mrs. Robert Harrison, not as the late Margaret Harrison or anything that would honor her memory, just as if she were still alive and married to me. A pause. That's how these things are done, Dad? It's protocol. And what about me? Where do I fit into this protocol? You're the host, Dad. It says Mr. and Mrs. Robert Harrison. That includes you. It includes a fictional version of me that doesn't exist anymore. It includes a couple that ceased to exist 3 years ago when your mother died. It doesn't include the actual man who raised you, who will be sitting alone at your wedding because his wife is dead and his son has decided he's an embarrassment. The silence stretches long enough that I wonder if he's hung up. When he finally speaks, his voice is tight with barely controlled irritation. Dad, you're making too much of this. It's just an invitation. The important thing is that you're invited, that we want you there. Can't you just accept that and move on? Can you tell me one thing, David? Did you read the invitation before it was printed? Of course I did. And when you read it, when you saw that it didn't mention your actual father anywhere, did it occur to you that something was wrong? Another pause. Dad, I don't know what you want me to say. I want you to tell me the truth. Did you intentionally leave my name off this invitation? Your name is on it, Mr. Robert Harrison. That's you. My name, David, not some generic title that could apply to anyone named Robert Harrison. My name, as your father, as the man who matters in your life. Is that anywhere on this invitation? The silence is deafening. I can almost hear him calculating, trying to find a way to deflect the question without actually lying. It's a skill he's developed in his professional life, this ability to avoid direct answers while maintaining plausible deniability. Dad, I think you're being unreasonable about this. Weddings are stressful, there are a lot of details to manage, and honestly, I have bigger things to worry about than invitation wording. Bigger things than your father. That's not what I meant, and you know it. But that's exactly what he meant. And we both know it? I've been categorized as a minor detail, a logistical concern to be managed rather than a person to be honored. The revelation shouldn't surprise me, but it still hits like a physical blow. I need to go, David. I have some thinking to do. Dad, don't make this into something it's not. Just come to the wedding, enjoy yourself, meet Catherine's family. It's going to be a great day. A great day for everyone except the father of the groom, who will spend it pretending he doesn't notice how carefully he's been marginalized from his son's new life. I hang up without saying goodbye and sit staring at the invitation. The elegant typography, the expensive paper, the formal language. It all seems designed to create distance, to establish that this event belongs to a world I'm not really part of. I'm allowed to attend, but not to participate. I'm a guest at my own son's wedding. The kitchen feels smaller than usual, crowded with memories that no longer fit my current reality. The table where we ate birthday dinners, the refrigerator where we posted David's report cards and art projects, the window where Margaret stood, watching for his car to pull into the driveway when he came home from college. All of it a monument to a family that apparently exists now only in my imagination. I walk back out to the garage, needing the comfort of honest work, of problems that can be solved with the right tools and enough patience. The rocking chair waits where I left it, half assembled, held together by temporary clamps while the glue dries. Each joint must be perfect, each angle precise, or the whole structure will be unstable. Unlike relationships, furniture doesn't lie. Wood either fits together properly or it doesn't. There's no room for interpretation, no way to explain away poor craftsmanship with social conventions or professional obligations. If you do shoddy work, the piece will fall apart. If you take your time and do it right, it will last for generations. I run my hand along the curve of the rocker, feeling the smooth transition from seat to runner. This part took 3 attempts to get right. The angle had to be perfect to ensure proper balance. Too steep and the chair would tip backward, too shallow, and it wouldn't rock smoothly. But when you get it exactly right, when every element works in harmony with every other element, the result is something beautiful and functional that brings joy to everyone who uses it. David will probably never sit in this chair. He'll probably never appreciate the hours of careful work it represents, the skill required to shape raw wood into something graceful and enduring. When I'm gone, it will probably end up in an estate sale, marked with a price tag that reflects its utility rather than its meaning. But I'm not building it for David anymore. I'm building it for myself. Because the act of creation is its own reward. Because in a world where relationships can be discarded and family bonds can be severed with elegant invitations, there's still satisfaction in making something that will outlast the person who made it. The sun is setting behind the trees, painting the garage in golden light that softens the edges of everything. This is my favorite time of day, when the harsh realities of life give way to something more forgiving, more beautiful. Margaret used to find me out here in the evenings, bringing me a beer and sitting on the old stool while I worked. She didn't often talk, just enjoyed the peaceful rhythm of sandpaper against wood, the quiet concentration that comes with manual labor. "You're happiest when you're making something," she told me once. "It's when you look most like yourself." I understand what she meant now. In here, surrounded by tools and half-finished projects, I remember who I am beneath all the roles I've played: husband, father, provider, protector. I'm a man who builds things, who solves problems, who takes pride in work done well. That identity doesn't depend on anyone else's approval or recognition. It exists independent of whether my son values it or not. The wedding is still 6 weeks away. 6 weeks to decide how to respond to this systematic erasure of my significance. 6 weeks to figure out whether there's any way to salvage a relationship that seems to have died so gradually I didn't notice until it was too late. Or 6 weeks to accept that some things can't be repaired, no matter how good your tools are or how much you want to fix them. Some breaks are too fundamental, too deep to bridge with anything less than a complete reconstruction. And maybe David doesn't want reconstruction. Maybe he's perfectly happy with the life he's built, the family he's chosen, the future he's planning without reference to his past. Maybe I'm the only one who thinks something valuable has been lost. I clean my tools and hang them in their designated spots, each one outlined in black marker like a shadow of its former usefulness. Tomorrow, I'll continue work on the rocking chair, fitting pieces together with the patience my father taught me, creating something that will endure long after the pain of this moment has faded. But tonight, I sit in the gathering darkness and try to accept that love isn't always enough, that you can give everything you have to someone and still end up invisible on their wedding invitation, that the boy who once took pride in doing his best work can grow into a man who considers his father a detail to be managed rather than a person to be honored. The lake reflects the last light of day, mirror smooth and eternal. It will be here tomorrow and next month, and long after this wedding has become just another memory. There's comfort in that permanence, that indifference to human disappointment. Some things endure, others just fade away no matter how much care went into building. The law library in downtown Millfield hasn't changed much in the 20 years since I last set foot inside it. Same heavy wooden tables, same musty smell of old books, same feeling that important things happen here. Decisions that reshape lives, documents that outlast the people who sign them. I feel out of place among the young lawyers with their expensive suits and confident expressions, but I have as much right to be here as anyone. The librarian, a woman about Margaret's age with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, helps me find what I need: estate planning, inheritance law, the legal framework that governs how a lifetime of work gets distributed when you're no longer around to supervise the process. It's sobering reading. All these formal procedures for dismantling someone's existence and parceling it out, according to rules and wishes and legal precedents. I've been thinking about this for 2 weeks now, ever since that final phone conversation with David. 2 weeks of sleepless nights and careful consideration, weighing options I never thought I'd have to consider. 2 weeks of watching the lake from my kitchen window and wondering how a man's life can become so small that his own son sees him as an inconvenience. My current will is simple: straightforward, exactly what you'd expect from a middle-class widower with one child. The house, the savings account, the pension benefits, the lake house property, all of it goes to David when I die. It seemed like the natural thing to do when Margaret and I drew it up 15 years ago. Who else would want the accumulation of our lifetime? Who else would understand its value? But that was before I understood how thoroughly David has edited me out of his life. Before I realized that my death will be just another logistical problem for him to solve, another piece of his unsophisticated past to dispose of efficiently and move on from. The estate planning books are full of stories about families torn apart by inheritance disputes, children who contest wills, relatives who emerge from nowhere to claim pieces of someone's legacy. But they don't talk much about the opposite problem. What happens when your heir doesn't value what you're leaving behind, when your life's work becomes burden rather than blessing? I make careful notes on a yellow legal pad, copying down relevant statutes and procedures. The process is more complicated than I expected, but not impossibly so. Charitable donations, trust funds, specific bequests to individuals outside the family. There are dozens of ways to ensure that your possessions end up where they'll be appreciated rather than discarded. The young lawyer at the table next to mine keeps glancing over, probably wondering what an old man in work clothes is doing researching inheritance law. If he asked, I could tell him I'm planning the most important project of my life, the careful dismantling of everything I've built, piece by piece, ensuring that each component finds its way to someone who will understand its value. Mrs. Patterson would love to have Margaret's china cabinet. She's admired it for 30 years, always commented on how beautifully Margaret arranged the good dishes behind the glass doors. The Hendersons across the lake could use my boat motor. I've seen them struggling with their old outboard, spending more time pulling the starter cord than actually fishing. The tools present a bigger challenge. They're not just possessions, but extensions of myself, each one chosen carefully, maintained religiously, used to create things that will outlast their maker. They deserve to go to someone who understands their purpose, who will use them properly, rather than sell them at a garage sale for whatever price gets them off the table quickly. Jake Patterson has been hanging around my garage more often lately, asking questions about woodworking, admiring the rocking chair I'm finishing. He has good hands, steady and careful, and he listens when I explain techniques. More importantly, he has patience, a rare quality in young people these days. He might appreciate inheriting tools that have been cared for, that come with the knowledge of how to use them properly. The lake house is the most valuable asset, worth perhaps $300,000 if sold to the right buyer. David has mentioned several times that it needs work, that maintaining two properties is expensive and complicated. He sees it as a liability rather than an opportunity, another burden inherited from his unfashionable parents. But the Methodist Church has been looking for a site for their youth camp, somewhere kids from the city could experience nature, learn responsibility, maybe discover that satisfaction doesn't always come from electronic devices. Pastor Williams mentioned it last month, wistful about the opportunities such a place could provide if they could find the funding. I can see it clearly. The old lake house transformed into a dining hall, new cabins built among the trees, children learning to fish from the dock where David caught his first bass. It would be alive again, filled with laughter and purpose, instead of slowly rotting away while my son decides whether it's worth the trouble of maintaining. The main house is different. The main house is personal, intimate, soaked with 40 years of memories that can't be transferred to strangers. This is where Margaret died, where David grew up, where every room tells the story of our family. Selling it to developers or speculators would feel like betrayal, but I can't think of anyone who would want to live with ghosts that don't belong to them. Maybe the Historical Society would be interested. The house is old enough to qualify for historic designation, and it's one of the few remaining examples of 1940s lake country architecture in the area. They could use it as a museum, a glimpse into how middle-class American families lived in the post-war era. Tour groups could walk through Margaret's kitchen, see the table where we ate breakfast for 35 years, learn about the dreams and disappointments of ordinary people who never made the history books. It's a strange thought, my private life becoming a public exhibit, strangers commenting on our furniture and our life choices. But there's appeal in the idea too. Instead of being erased from history, we'd become part of it. Instead of David's embarrassing past, we'd be an example of something worth preserving. The librarian approaches as I'm packing up my notes. "Finding everything you need?" she asks with genuine concern. "I think so," I tell her, just trying to understand my options. Estate planning can be overwhelming. Have you considered consulting with an attorney? We have a list of local lawyers who specialize in this area. I take the list she offers, though I'm not sure I need professional help yet. What I'm planning isn't particularly complex legally, just morally complicated. How do you disinherit someone without destroying them? How do you teach a lesson about value and respect without seeming vindictive or petty? The drive home takes me past the Methodist Church, a modest brick building that served the community for over a century. Pastor Williams is outside, struggling to fix a broken sprinkler head in the small garden beside the front steps. I pull into the parking lot and offer to help. "Bob Harrison," he says, genuinely pleased to see me. Perfect timing. I've been fighting with this thing for an hour. The problem is simple, a cracked fitting that needs to be replaced. I have the right part in my garage, along with the tools to install it properly. "I'll bring everything over tomorrow morning," I tell him. "Take me 15 minutes to fix it right." "You're a godsend. Margaret always said you could fix anything with moving parts." We talk for a few minutes about church business, community news, the upcoming Harvest Festival. Then, as casually as I can manage, I bring up the youth camp idea. "Still looking for a site?" I ask. "Always. The need is definitely there. We've got kids from 3 counties who could benefit from a program like that. But finding the right property at a price we can afford?" He shakes his head. "The Lord will provide, I'm sure. We just have to be patient." "What would you need exactly, in terms of facilities?" Pastor Williams describes his vision: a main building for meals and activities, simple cabins for overnight stays, space for outdoor programs like hiking and fishing and basic woodworking. "Nothing fancy," he emphasizes. "Just a place where children can disconnect from the world for a while and discover what they're capable of when they're not distracted by all the noise of modern life." It sounds exactly right. It sounds like what the lake house was always meant to be, a place where people could remember what matters, where they could build things with their hands and appreciate the simple satisfaction of work done well. "I might know of a property," I tell him. "Let me think about it." The drive home gives me time to imagine how it would work. The legal mechanics are straightforward enough. Establish a charitable trust, transfer the property, take the tax deduction. David would inherit exactly what he's given me in terms of respect and recognition. Nothing at all. The main house is a different challenge. I want it to survive, want it to tell our story, but I don't want David to have the option of simply selling it to the highest bidder. The Historical Society is a possibility, but they might not have the resources to maintain it properly. Then I remember the conversation with Mrs. Patterson last week, when she mentioned that her nephew is a lawyer specializing in historical preservation. Maybe there's a way to structure things so the house is protected permanently, maintained as it should be, open to people who would appreciate its history. The garage feels different when I walk inside, as if the tools and projects have taken on new significance. These aren't just possessions anymore. They're a legacy, carefully chosen gifts for people who will understand their value. Each chisel, each saw, each hand plane represents hours of honest work, problems solved, things created that will outlast their creator. I pull out a fresh notebook and start making lists, not just of possessions and their intended recipients, but of the stories that go with them. Jake should know that the mortise chisel belonged to my father, that it's been maintained for 60 years and will cut clean joints for 60 more if it's cared for properly. Mrs. Patterson should understand that the china cabinet was Margaret's pride, that she spent hours arranging and rearranging the dishes for holiday dinners that brought our family together. The rocking chair is nearly finished now, just some final sanding and a coat of oil to bring out the grain. It's perhaps the best work I've ever done, every joint perfect, every curve flowing smoothly into the next, the kind of piece that will be admired by woodworkers a century from now. I'd planned to give it to David, thinking he might appreciate something made specifically for him by his father's hands. But David has made it clear that he doesn't value things made by hand, doesn't see worth in work that can't be measured in dollars or professional advancement. The chair deserves better. It deserves to go to someone who will sit in it on quiet evenings, appreciating the care that went into its creation, understanding that real wealth isn't always monetary. Maybe Jake, when he's older and has a family of his own. Maybe someone from the church who would see it as a blessing rather than an inheritance. Maybe even the historical society, if they could use it as an example of local craftsmanship. The important thing is that it goes to someone who will treasure it, not someone who will evaluate it based on whether it fits his contemporary decor. My phone rings as I'm measuring the final pieces for the chair's back. It's David again, and I consider not answering, but avoiding him won't solve anything, and I'm curious to hear what new explanation he's developed for the invitation situation. Dad, I've been thinking about our conversation, and I want to make sure we're okay. His tone is careful, conciliatory, the voice he probably uses with difficult clients who need to be managed rather than confronted. We're fine, David. Good, because I'd hate for there to be any tension around the wedding. It's important to Catherine and me that everyone feels welcome and included. Everyone. Still not you, not my father, just the generic everyone that could apply to any random guest. I appreciate that, I say, keeping my voice neutral. So you'll be there? I can send you information about hotels, maybe help with transportation if you need it. I'll let you know. Dad, is something wrong? You sound distant. Distant. The word hangs in the air between us, rich with unintended irony. I'm distant because I've been pushed to a distance, carefully and systematically excluded from his life until I exist only on the periphery of his attention. Just tired, I tell him, working on a project that's taking longer than expected. The famous rocking chair? You've been working on that thing for months. It's worth doing right. I'm sure it is. Listen, Dad, I should probably mention that we are having a pretty big wedding. Catherine's family is, well, they're used to formal events. Black tie, multiple courses, that kind of thing. I just want to make sure you're comfortable with that. Translation. Please don't embarrass me in front of my new in-laws. Please try to fit into their sophisticated world without calling attention to your working-class origins. I think I can manage formal dinner conversation, David. Of course you can. I didn't mean to imply. I just want you to feel included. There's that word again. Included. As if inclusion is something he can grant or withhold at will. As if my relationship to him depends on his generous permission rather than biology and history and 32 years of love and sacrifice. I'll be fine, I tell him. Great. Well, I should go. Catherine and I are looking at venues for the rehearsal dinner tonight. But I'm glad we talked. I feel better knowing we're on the same page. We're not on the same page. We're not even reading the same book anymore. But there's no point in explaining that to someone who's already decided that my concerns are unreasonable, my feelings are oversensitive, my very existence is a detail to be managed rather than celebrated. Take care, David. You too, Dad. Love you. The words sound automatic, obligatory, stripped of the warmth that once made them meaningful. I hang up wondering when love you became something he says to end conversations rather than express genuine emotion. The garage settles back into comfortable silence. Outside, the lake reflects the late afternoon sky, unchanged and eternal. Inside, my tools wait patiently for the next project, the next problem to solve, the next opportunity to create something lasting from raw materials and careful attention. I open my notebook and continue making lists. People who would appreciate Margaret's quilts, organizations that could use my books, friends who might treasure some small memento of our friendship. Each item carefully considered, each recipient chosen not for convenience, but for compatibility. It's satisfying work, this careful distribution of a lifetime's accumulation. Like planning a complex woodworking project, every piece must fit properly with every other piece, or the whole structure will be unstable. David will get exactly what he's given me. Formal recognition without substance, acknowledgement without meaning. He'll be invited to my funeral, just as I'm invited to his wedding. He'll be listed in the obituary as my surviving son, just as I'm listed on his invitation as part of a generic hosting entity. But the things that matter, the possessions and properties that represent real value, will go to people who understand their worth, people who will use them properly, care for them appropriately, pass them down to others who will appreciate their significance. It's not about revenge or punishment. It's about ensuring that what Margaret and I built together finds its way to people who will honor its memory rather than dispose of it efficiently. It's about teaching a lesson that I should have taught years ago, that respect is earned, not inherited, and that family relationships require more than biological connection to remain meaningful. The rocking chair gleams in the workshop light, nearly complete, waiting for its final finish. Tomorrow, I'll apply the oil that will bring out the grain, protect the wood, ensure that it remains beautiful for generations. Then I'll decide who deserves to receive it. Someone who will understand that real craftsmanship can't be bought, only earned through patience and skill and genuine care. Someone who will rock in it on quiet evenings and appreciate the love that went into every carefully fitted joint. Someone who won't measure its worth by whether it matches their sophisticated decor. The Drake Hotel rises from Michigan Avenue like a monument to old money and new pretensions, its limestone facade gleaming in the June sunlight. I sit in my rental car for 10 minutes, watching well-dressed people flow through the ornate entrance, trying to summon the courage to join them. My black suit, the same one I wore to Margaret's funeral, feels tight across the shoulders, a reminder that I haven't attended many formal events in the past 3 years. The valet parking attendant approaches with practiced efficiency, but I wave him off and find a spot on the street 6 blocks away. $15 for a few hours of parking seems reasonable compared to whatever the hotel charges for the privilege of having someone else move your car 20 feet. The walk gives me time to think, to rehearse what I'm about to do. In my briefcase, carried like a shield against my side, are the documents that will change everything. Not the dramatic confrontation I once imagined, not the angry outburst that would only confirm David's belief that his father is an embarrassment. Just quiet, legal documents that speak louder than any shouting match ever could. The hotel lobby overwhelms with its marble floors and crystal chandeliers, its careful arrangement of furniture that costs more than most people make in a year. I feel like an imposter in this world of understated luxury. But I keep walking toward the elevator bank, briefcase in hand, back straight, despite the weight of what I'm carrying. The wedding is on the 19th floor, in a ballroom that overlooks the lake. Through the tall windows, I can see water that might be the same lake that borders my backyard, though from this height and distance it looks different, smaller, more decorative, like a painting instead of a living thing. Catherine's family has claimed the front rows of chairs, a collection of elegant people who look like they were born knowing how to navigate events like this. The women wear understated jewelry that probably costs more than my annual pension. The men sport the kind of casual confidence that comes from never doubting your place in the world. David's side is smaller, composed mostly of colleagues from his consulting firm, and a few college friends I recognize from previous visits. I take a seat in the back row, noting that no one has saved a place for me in the family section. Another small erasure. Another reminder that I'm here as a guest rather than a participant. The ceremony itself is beautiful in an impersonal way. Catherine looks stunning in a dress that probably required 3 fittings and a small team of assistants to achieve its perfect drape. David stands at the altar in a tuxedo that transforms him into someone I barely recognize. Sophisticated, polished, carefully groomed for success. Pastor Williams would call this a church wedding, but there's nothing religious about it beyond the basic structure of vows and rings. The officiant, a judge who's apparently a family friend, speaks about commitment and partnership and building a life together. But the words feel rehearsed, empty of the sacred weight that should accompany the moment when 2 people promise to love each other until death separates them. I think about my own wedding 34 years ago, in the Methodist church where Margaret and I met. The sanctuary was small, the flowers were simple, and the reception was cake and punch in the church basement. But there was joy in that little building, genuine celebration from people who knew us and cared about our future together. Our vows weren't professionally written or perfectly delivered, but they came from our hearts, witnessed by the community that would support us through the challenges ahead. This feels more like a business merger than a marriage, a carefully orchestrated event designed to impress rather than celebrate. The photographer moves constantly, capturing angles that will look good in the expensive album Catherine will probably display prominently in their contemporary living room. When the judge pronounces them husband and wife, David kisses his bride with the same careful precision he brings to everything else in his life. The applause is polite, measured, the response of people who know they're witnessing something important, but aren't quite sure why. The cocktail hour gives me my first real chance to observe David in his natural habitat. He moves through the crowd with easy confidence, introducing Catherine to his colleagues, accepting congratulations with practiced humility. He's learned the social skills necessary for success in his world, how to make small talk with strangers, how to remember names and personal details, how to make everyone feel like they have his complete attention. But there's something performative about it all, as if he's playing a role he's studied carefully, but doesn't quite inhabit naturally. The boy who used to get tongue-tied around adults has become a man who can work any room. But somewhere in that transformation, the authenticity got lost. I nurse a gin and tonic and watch him interact with Catherine's father, a silver-haired man who radiates the kind of authority that comes from running companies and serving on boards. They discuss golf courses and investment strategies with the easy familiarity of people who have always had money and assume everyone worth knowing shares their interests. You must be David's father. I turn to find Catherine's mother, an elegant woman in her early 60s who's managed to age gracefully through careful attention to diet, exercise, and probably some strategic cosmetic procedures. Her smile is warm but careful, the expression of someone who's learned to be pleasant to everyone while revealing nothing about her actual thoughts. "Bob Harrison," I say, extending my hand. "Congratulations on the wedding. It's beautiful." "Thank you. I'm Elizabeth Winters. Catherine has told me so much about you." This is news to me, since Catherine barely spoke to me during her one visit to my house. But social conventions require certain lies, and I'm willing to play along. "All good, I hope." "Of course. She mentioned that you live by a lake. How lovely that must be." "It has its moments." "I can imagine. Charles and I have a place in the Hamptons, right on the water. There's something so peaceful about being near the ocean, don't you think?" The conversation continues in this vein for several minutes. Polite exchanges that convey no real information while maintaining the appearance of interest. She asks about my retirement activities and nods approvingly when I mention woodworking, as if I'm a charming primitive who still makes things with his hands. When she excuses herself to check on some detail of the reception, I'm left wondering if this is how David sees me now, as a quaint remnant of his past, someone to be managed with polite conversation and careful distance. The reception ballroom has been transformed into something from a magazine spread. Round tables draped in ivory linens, centerpieces of white roses and baby's breath that probably cost more than I spend on groceries in a month. The lighting has been dimmed to create atmosphere, and a string quartet plays classical music that provides elegant background noise without demanding attention. I find my assigned table and discover that I'm seated with David's college friends and their spouses, people young enough to be my children, sophisticated enough to make me feel like their grandfather. They're polite but puzzled by my presence, clearly uncertain how to include a retired small-town resident in their conversations about urban restaurants and European vacation destinations. The dinner is elaborate, multiple courses served by waiters who appear and disappear with choreographed precision. Each dish is artfully presented, a small portion of expensive ingredients arranged to look more like sculpture than food. It's delicious, I'm sure, but it's also the kind of meal that prioritizes appearance over substance, style over satisfaction. David and Catherine make their rounds between courses, stopping at each table to thank guests for coming. When they reach mine, David introduces me with careful enthusiasm. "Everyone, this is my dad, Bob Harrison. Dad, these are my friends from Northwestern, Tom and Sarah, Mike and Jennifer, Chris and Amanda." The introductions are polite, perfunctory. I shake hands and smile and answer the inevitable questions about where I live and what I used to do for work. They nod with the polite interest of people who are being kind to their friend's father, but it's clear that I'm an obligation rather than a welcome addition to their celebration. "Dad's quite the craftsman," David tells the table. "He's been working on this incredible rocking chair for months. Real museum-quality work." It's a generous description, more enthusiasm than he's shown for my woodworking in years. But there's something patronizing about it too, as if he's highlighting my quaint hobby for the amusement of his sophisticated friends. "How fascinating," says Sarah, who probably couldn't identify a dovetail joint if her life depended on it. "It must be so satisfying to create something with your hands." It is, I agree, but the conversation has already moved on to other topics. Someone's promotion, someone else's upcoming trip to Tuscany, the kind of casual affluence that defines their world. When the formal program begins, I excuse myself and walk to the men's room, needing a few minutes away from the careful pleasantries and polite exclusion. In the marble-lined sanctuary, I check my appearance in the mirror and try to prepare myself for what comes next. The briefcase feels heavier when I retrieve it from beneath my table. Inside are the documents I've spent weeks preparing, the legal papers that will reshape David's expectations about his inheritance. Not out of spite or revenge, but out of a deeper need to ensure that what Margaret and I built together goes to people who will value it properly. The speeches begin as I return to my seat. Catherine's father talks about family traditions and the importance of choosing the right partner. David's best man, a colleague from his firm, shares amusing stories about David's obsessive attention to detail and his determination to succeed at everything he attempts. When it's David's turn to speak, he stands with the microphone in his hand and surveys the room with visible satisfaction. This is his moment, his opportunity to address the assembled representatives of his new life. Catherine and I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, he begins. Looking around this room, seeing all the people who matter to us, I'm struck by how lucky we are to have such wonderful family and friends. He talks about Catherine's family, praising their warmth and generosity in welcoming him. He thanks his colleagues for their support and friendship. He acknowledges various relatives and mentors who have shaped his life and career. But he doesn't mention me, not once, not even a generic reference to my father or the man who raised me. In his catalog of important influences and meaningful relationships, I simply don't exist. The omission is so glaring, so obviously intentional, that several people at my table glance at me with uncomfortable expressions. Even David's sophisticated friends understand that something is wrong when a groom fails to acknowledge his father during his wedding speech. When the applause dies down and the dancing begins, I stand up and walk toward the head table where David is accepting congratulations from various guests. I wait my turn, briefcase in hand, until he notices me approaching. "Dad, great to see you. Are you having a good time?" His voice carries that forced enthusiasm that adults use with children, that careful cheerfulness that signals obligation rather than genuine pleasure. "It's been educational," I tell him. "Good, good. The food was amazing, wasn't it? Catherine's mother knows all the best vendors in the city." "David, I have something for you." I open the briefcase and remove a manila envelope, thick with legal documents that represent months of careful planning. David looks at it with curiosity rather than concern, probably expecting some sentimental gift or family keepsake. "What's this?" "Your wedding present. I thought you should have it tonight while everyone's here." He opens the envelope and begins reading the top document, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to something approaching panic. It's a copy of my new will, the one I filed with my attorney last week, the one that redistributes my entire estate according to principles David apparently doesn't understand. "Dad, what is this?" "It's exactly what it looks like. A legal document that ensures my possessions go to people who will appreciate them." His voice drops to an urgent whisper. "We can't discuss this here. Not tonight." "Why not? It's your wedding day. I thought you should know what kind of legacy you're inheriting." The people nearby are beginning to notice our conversation, drawn by the tension in David's voice and the formal nature of the document spread between us. Catherine appears at David's side, beautiful and bewildered, clearly sensing that something is wrong without understanding what. "David, is everything okay?" He forces a smile and tries to reassemble his composure. "Fine, sweetheart. Just some paperwork from Dad. Nothing important." But his hands are shaking as he shuffles through the pages, and his face has gone pale beneath his careful tan. He's reading about the lake house going to the Methodist youth camp, about the house being donated to the Historical Society, about his inheritance being reduced to whatever's left in my checking account when I die. "We need to talk about this privately," he says, his voice tight with controlled panic. "We've been talking privately for months, David. You've made your position clear through your actions, your invitations, your speeches. I'm just responding in kind. Dad, please, not here, not tonight." "When then? When would be convenient for you to discuss your father's existence? Because apparently it's never been convenient before." The nearby conversations have stopped entirely now. Catherine's family, David's colleagues, all the elegant people who matter to his new life, are watching this middle-class drama unfold in their sophisticated ballroom. This is exactly what David has always feared. His embarrassing father making a scene in front of people whose opinions matter. But I'm not making a scene. I'm speaking quietly, calmly, with the same measured tone I use when explaining woodworking techniques to someone who needs to understand the importance of precision. The drama is in the documents themselves, in the systematic redistribution of everything David has taken for granted. Your speech was very moving, I tell him, my voice carrying just enough to be heard by the nearest tables. Very thorough in its acknowledgments. I especially appreciated how you thanked everyone who has contributed to your success. Dad, I realize tonight that I've been approaching this all wrong. I've been expecting gratitude, recognition, some acknowledgement of the relationship between us. But you've taught me that expectations like that are unrealistic. You're not being fair. Fair? You sent me a wedding invitation that doesn't include my name. You gave a speech that doesn't mention my existence. You've spent years treating me like an embarrassment to be managed rather than a father to be honored. I'm being perfectly fair. I'm giving you exactly what you've given me. Catherine touches David's arm, trying to understand the undercurrents of this conversation that's threatening to derail her perfect wedding. Maybe we should take this somewhere private, she suggests. There's nothing private about it, I tell her. It's all public record now. Legal documents, properly filed, completely transparent. Just like your wedding invitation. I close the briefcase and step back, looking at my son. Successful, sophisticated, carefully groomed for a life I no longer recognize. He's gotten everything he wanted from his relationship with me. Financial support for his education, family connections that helped him get started, the security of knowing there was always somewhere to come home to if his plans didn't work out. And in return, he's given me the privilege of being excluded from his most important moments. Congratulations on your marriage, I tell them both. I hope you're very happy together. I turn and walk toward the elevator, leaving behind the careful elegance and polite conversations and expensive flowers that will be thrown away tomorrow. Behind me, I can hear David calling my name, but I don't turn around. I've said everything that needs to be said, delivered the only wedding gift that matters. The elevator carries me down to the lobby, away from the world David has chosen over the one where he was raised. Outside, Michigan Avenue buzzes with Saturday night energy. People heading to restaurants and theaters and other celebrations that don't require legal documents to clarify family relationships. The walk back to my car gives me time to process what just happened. Not the confrontation I'd imagined, not the dramatic revelation that would suddenly make David understand what he's lost. Just a quiet transfer of information, a practical solution to a relationship problem that has no emotional resolution. By the time I reach my car, my phone is ringing. David probably calling to explain, or apologize, or try to negotiate his way back into my good graces. But I don't answer. I've spent months trying to understand how we reached this point. And tonight, I finally got my answer. He doesn't value what we had. He doesn't appreciate what I've given him. He doesn't want me in his new life except as a distant, manageable presence who won't interfere with his carefully constructed image. So I've given him exactly what he wants. Distance, independence, freedom from any obligation to acknowledge where he came from or who helped him get where he is. The drive home takes 2 hours, 2 hours of quiet reflection, as the city gives way to suburbs and then to the rural landscape I understand. By the time I reach my own driveway, the lake house sitting peaceful and familiar in the moonlight, I feel lighter than I have in months. The rocking chair waits in the garage, finished now, except for one final coat of oil. Tomorrow I'll complete it, then decide who deserves to inherit something made with love and patience and skill. Someone who will understand that real value isn't measured in dollars or social status, but in the care that goes into creating something meant to last. Someone who won't need legal documents to remember where they came from. The phone starts ringing at 6:30 Sunday morning, jerking me awake from the first peaceful sleep I've had in weeks. I let it go to the answering machine, then listen to David's voice filling my kitchen with urgent pleas for conversation. He sounds different than he did last night. Less controlled, more desperate. The careful composure finally cracking under pressure. Dad, please pick up. We need to talk about this. I know you're angry, but we can work this out. Just please call me back. 3 more calls follow in the next hour, each one more frantic than the last. By the fourth message, David sounds like he's been crying, though I've never known him to show that kind of vulnerability since he was 12 and broke his arm falling out of the oak tree in our backyard. I make coffee and sit at the kitchen table, looking out at the lake, while David's voice pleads from the answering machine. The water is calm this morning, mirror smooth under an overcast sky that promises rain later. It's the kind of day Margaret and I used to spend inside, working on projects or reading together, while the weather made the house feel like a sanctuary. The fifth call comes as I'm finishing my first cup of coffee. This time, I answer. Dad, thank God. Listen, I'm driving up there right now. We need to talk face to face. That's not necessary, David. Yes, it is. What you did last night, I've been up all night thinking about it, and I realize I may have given you the wrong impression about some things. Wrong impression. Even now, facing the complete restructuring of his inheritance, he can't bring himself to admit that his treatment of me has been deliberate and sustained. I don't think there's been any misunderstanding, I tell him. Dad, please, just give me a chance to explain. I'm already on the highway. I'll be there in 2 hours. The line goes dead before I can respond, leaving me with the certainty that my quiet Sunday is about to become something else entirely. Part of me wants to leave, to drive somewhere David can't find me, to avoid the conversation that's been building for months. But running away won't solve anything, and despite everything that's happened, he's still my son. I use the 2 hours to work in the garage, applying the final coat of oil to the rocking chair I finished yesterday. The wood drinks it in hungrily, the grain coming alive under the protective finish that will preserve it for decades. Each stroke of the cloth releases the smell of linseed oil and accomplishment, the satisfaction that comes from completing something difficult and doing it right. This piece represents perhaps the best work I've ever done. Every joint is perfect. Every curve flows naturally into the next. Every surface is smooth enough to pass the ultimate test, running your hand across it with your eyes closed and feeling no imperfections. It's the kind of craftsmanship that takes a lifetime to develop, and I've poured all of that experience into these carefully shaped pieces of cherry wood. David won't inherit this chair. According to the documents I gave him last night, it will go to Jake Patterson when he turns 25, along with my father's tools and the knowledge of how to use them properly. Jake has the patience and respect necessary to appreciate such a gift. More importantly, he has the humility to understand that real skill is earned through practice and dedication, not purchased with money or inherited through accident of birth. The sound of tires on gravel announces David's arrival. Through the garage window, I watch him climb out of his BMW, still wearing yesterday's wedding clothes, but rumpled now, exhausted. He looks older somehow, as if the events of last night have aged him in ways that normal time cannot accomplish. I continue working on the chair, letting him come to me. The oil needs to be applied evenly, worked into the grain with patience and attention. It's meditative work, requiring just enough concentration to keep my mind focused on the task rather than the confrontation approaching. Dad? He stands in the garage doorway like a supplicant, uncertain of his welcome. The confident man who worked the wedding reception has been replaced by someone who looks lost, vulnerable, stripped of the social armor that usually protects him from uncomfortable truths. Hello, David. Can we talk? I set down the oiling cloth and turned to face him properly. He looks terrible, pale, hollow-eyed, his expensive clothes wrinkled from sleeping in his car or not sleeping at all. This is the son I remember from childhood, the boy who used to come to me when the world seemed too big and complicated for him to handle alone. What would you like to talk about? About last night, about those documents, about what you're planning to do. I'm not planning anything. I've already done it. The will has been filed, the charitable trusts have been established, the property transfers have been arranged. It's all quite legal and properly documented. He runs his hands through his hair, a gesture I remember from his teenage years when he was struggling with some problem that seemed insurmountable. Dad, I think there's been a misunderstanding about the wedding, about the invitation, about everything. Explain it to me. The invitation thing, that really was just a formatting issue. The printer suggested that wording, and I didn't think about how it would sound to you. I should have been more careful, but it wasn't intentional. I pick up a piece of sandpaper and begin smoothing a small imperfection on the chair's armrest, keeping my hands busy while my mind processes his words. And the speech? What about it? You thanked everyone who had contributed to your success, your new in-laws, your colleagues, your friends, but not the man who raised you, who paid for your education, who supported you through every stage of your life until you decided he was no longer necessary. The words hang in the air between us, sharp with accumulated hurt and careful observation. David shifts uncomfortably, probably realizing for the first time how his omission appeared to everyone in that ballroom. I was nervous. I had notes, but I got distracted and forgot to mention a lot of people. It wasn't personal. It was completely personal, David. Everything about last night was personal. The seating arrangements that put me in the back with your college friends instead of the front with family. The introduction where you called me my dad like I was some distant relative instead of the man who taught you how to ride a bike and helped you with your homework and drove you to college when you were too nervous to go alone. Dad, you're reading too much into things. I stop sanding and look at him directly. This man who shares my genes but seems to have inherited none of my values. Am I? Tell me, David, when was the last time you called me just to talk? Not because you needed something, not because you had news to share, but just because you wanted to hear my voice. He opens his mouth to answer, then closes it again, apparently unable to identify such a conversation. When was the last time you asked about my life, my health, my plans? When was the last time you seemed genuinely interested in anything about me beyond my ability to play the role of proud father when you needed one? That's not fair, isn't it? You've been auditioning for a different family for years, David. Catherine's family, with their money and their connections and their sophisticated understanding of how successful people live. You've been practicing being their son-in-law while slowly disconnecting from being my son. I set down the sandpaper and face him fully, wanting him to see the complete honesty in my expression. I'm not angry about your success. I'm proud of what you've accomplished, proud that you've built a life that makes you happy. But I am angry about how you've accomplished it, by systematically erasing the parts of your history that don't fit your new image. I haven't erased anything. Haven't you? When was the last time you brought a colleague to this house? When was the last time you mentioned your small-town upbringing to your sophisticated friends? When was the last time you acted like you were proud of where you came from, instead of embarrassed by it? David looks around the garage, taking in the organized tools, the half-finished projects, the accumulated evidence of a lifetime spent making things with my hands. His expression is complex, part nostalgia, part condescension, part something I can't quite identify. This isn't about embarrassment, Dad. It's about moving forward, building a new life. That doesn't mean I'm ashamed of my childhood. Then why does every aspect of your adult life suggest otherwise? The question seems to catch him off guard. He leans against the workbench, suddenly looking exhausted, as if the effort of maintaining his careful explanations has drained him completely. I don't know how to be both, he admits quietly. I don't know how to be successful in my world while still being the person I was here. They're different languages, different sets of expectations. Catherine's family, they judge people by things you don't care about. Education, connections, cultural sophistication. If I want to belong in that world, I have to speak their language. And speaking their language requires forgetting mine. Not forgetting, just not emphasizing certain aspects of my background. The honesty is refreshing, even if the content is painful. For the first time in years, David is telling me the truth about how he sees our relationship, our family, our life together. I understand the pressure, I tell him, but you made a choice, David. You chose to prioritize belonging in their world over maintaining an honest relationship with me. You chose their approval over my feelings. You chose their values over the ones your mother and I tried to teach you. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. Every relationship requires choices, priorities, decisions about what matters most. You've made yours very clear. I walk to the window that overlooks the lake, gathering my thoughts before continuing. Your mother saw this coming years ago. She warned me that you were building walls, that success was changing you in ways that might make it impossible for us to reach you. I didn't want to believe her, but she was right. Mom would understand. Would she? Would she understand how you could marry someone without involving your family in the planning? Would she understand how you could stand in front of 200 people and thank everyone except the parents who sacrificed everything to give you the opportunities you've used so well? David's silence stretches long enough to constitute an answer. He knows Margaret wouldn't understand, wouldn't approve, wouldn't accept his explanations any more than I do. The will, Dad. Can we talk about the will? What about it? You're giving away everything. The house, the lake house, all of it. To strangers. Not to strangers. To people who will value what they receive. The lake house will become a place where children can learn about nature, about responsibility, about working with their hands. The house will be preserved as an example of how middle-class American families lived, how they built meaningful lives without requiring wealth or status. And I get nothing. You get exactly what you've given me, formal recognition without substance. Your name will be in my obituary, just like mine was on your wedding invitation. You'll be acknowledged as my son, just like I was acknowledged as your father. The difference is that my acknowledgement will be accurate. The words hit him like physical blows. He staggers slightly, gripping the edge of the workbench for support. You can't be serious about this. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Dad, I know I've made mistakes. I know I haven't been the son you wanted. But disinheriting me completely, that's cruel. Is it more cruel than spending 3 years treating your father like an embarrassment? Is it more cruel than sending wedding invitations that erase his existence? Is it more cruel than giving speeches that forget to mention the man who made your success possible? I sit down on the stool where Margaret used to perch when she wanted to watch me work, where she'd offer advice or just enjoy the peaceful rhythm of sandpaper against wood. I'm not doing this to hurt you, David. I'm doing this to ensure that what your mother and I built together goes to people who will appreciate it. You've made it clear that you don't value these things, that they don't fit into your sophisticated new life. So I'm making sure they find their way to people who do value them. I do value them. No, you don't. You value what they represent: financial security, property that can be sold or leveraged, assets that can be converted into the kind of wealth your new family recognizes. But you don't value what they actually are: the accumulated love and work and sacrifice of two people who spent 40 years building something meaningful together. David starts crying then, the first genuine emotion I've seen from him in years. Not the careful tears of social performance, but the ugly, honest sobbing of someone whose world has just collapsed around him. I don't know how to fix this, he admits through his tears. I don't know how to be the son you want me to be. I don't want you to be anyone other than who you are, David. But I also don't want to pretend that who you are includes any real connection to me or respect for what I represent in your life. I stand up and walk to the rocking chair, running my hand over its perfect surface one final time. This chair will outlast both of us. Whoever inherits it will pass it down to their children, who will pass it to theirs. 100 years from now, someone will sit in it and appreciate the care that went into every joint, every curve, every surface. They'll understand that real value isn't measured in dollars, but in the love and skill that goes into creating something meant to last. I could learn to appreciate things like that. Could you? Would you really want to, or would you just want me to think you do? Because there's a difference, David, and I'm too old to waste time on performances. The rain that's been threatening all morning finally begins, drumming against the garage roof with increasing intensity. The sound is comforting, familiar. The same sound that used to send Margaret and me inside to work on indoor projects while the weather made the world feel small and safe. What would it take, David asks quietly. What would it take for you to change your mind? It's the question I've been expecting, the negotiation phase where he tries to find some way to minimize the consequences of his choices without actually acknowledging their significance. It would take you to become someone you're not, I tell him honestly. It would take you to value things you don't value, to want a relationship you don't want, to care about a man whose existence embarrasses you. And even if you could pretend to do all those things, I'd know it was pretense. So there's nothing I can do. There's nothing you want to do, David, and that's the real problem. The rain intensifies, creating a wall of sound that isolates us in this space filled with tools and memories, and the growing understanding that some relationships can't be repaired, no matter how much love went into building them originally. David wipes his eyes and straightens his shoulders, reassembling the composure that served him so well in his professional life. "I should go," he says. "Catherine will be wondering where I am. Give her my regards." He walks toward the garage door, then stops and turns back. "I did love you, Dad. I do love you. I know it doesn't look like it, but it's true." "I know," I tell him, "and I love you too. But love isn't enough anymore, is it? It has to be accompanied by respect, by consideration, by some recognition that relationships require care and attention to survive." He nods slowly, understanding finally that this isn't about anger or punishment, but about the natural consequences of choices made consistently over time. "Goodbye, Dad." "Goodbye, David." I watch him walk to his car through the rain, this successful man who shares my name but no longer shares my life. He'll drive back to Chicago, back to his sophisticated wife and his important career and his carefully constructed future. He'll probably tell Catherine that his father is unstable, vindictive, unable to appreciate his success or understand his choices. And maybe he'll be right. Maybe I am too old, too set in my ways, too attached to values that no longer matter in his world. Maybe the fault lies with me for expecting loyalty and consideration from someone who has outgrown the need for either. But as I return to my work on the rocking chair, as I apply the final touches that will preserve it for generations, I know that some things are worth preserving regardless of whether they are currently fashionable. Love, respect, family loyalty, the satisfaction of work done well, these aren't outdated concepts, but timeless values that give life meaning beyond professional achievement or social status. The chair will find its way to someone who understands that. And maybe someday David will too, but not today. Today he drives back to his new life while I remain in my old one, both of us finally honest about who we are and what we value. The rain continues, washing the world clean, preparing it for whatever comes next. 3 months have passed since David's wedding, 3 months of silence that feels heavier than before. This isn't casual neglect, it's the silence of a burned bridge. I sit on the back porch with my coffee, watching the lake shimmer under a sky already promising autumn. The house feels smaller these days, not physically, but in spirit. Fewer echoes, fewer expectations. Yesterday, Jake came by to collect the rocking chair. He ran his hands along the joints, asking careful questions about wood grain and joinery. I told him it would be his when he turned 25. "I'll take care of it," he said, eyes wet. "I know you will, son," I replied, without thinking. But it felt right. Jake has become more of a son to me than David has been in years. He helps with yard work, listens when I speak, and asks about things that matter to me. He asked yesterday about the jewelry box David and I built together. "David gave it back after Margaret died," I said. "Said he didn't have space for it." Jake shook his head. "Some people don't know what they have. Some never do." Next month, the Historical Society will assess the house. Rebecca Walsh, their director, walked through each room last week like she was seeing history in real time. "This place is exactly what we hope to preserve," she told me. "The life of a middle-class American family, intact, detailed, personal." She lingered in the kitchen, studying Margaret's recipe box, her grocery lists. Even her handwriting became part of the legacy. That afternoon, I signed the preliminary papers. Soon, this house will become a public memory. Strange to imagine strangers walking through our bedroom, commenting on wallpaper choices and photo albums. But there's comfort in it too. At least something of our life will endure. The lake house transition has taken more effort. Pastor Williams and the camp committee are working with architects to turn it into a retreat where children can learn to fish, hike, and disconnect from the modern world. The dock will be preserved. A plaque will mention our family. Ironic, isn't it? That other children will learn life's basics at a place where my own grandson will never visit. But better that than watching it rot into the lake, neglected. David hasn't called. Sometimes I wonder if he ever drives past the house and sees the signs. Catherine did send a thank you note. "Dear Mr. Harrison, thank you for your generous gift." Polite, empty, like our relationship. I kept it for a week, then tossed it out. Mrs. Patterson keeps me updated on town gossip and helps run interference with curious reporters. "They all want to make it sound like drama," she says. I tell them it's just a man making sure what he built goes where it'll be valued. She gets it. This was never about revenge. It's about values. David values ambition, polish, upward momentum. I value patience, loyalty, craftsmanship. There's no judgment, just incompatibility. The tools are gone now, distributed to people who understand them. Jake received my father's chisels. The church got my lawn equipment. My neighbor, a furniture restorer, was thrilled to receive my antique planes. Each came with a story. Not because they needed one, but because I needed to tell it. So something more than the tool survives. Evenings are hardest. That was Margaret's time. We'd sit quietly, share thoughts, or just exist in the same room. Now it's just silence, and clocks, and the occasional echo. Dr. Morrison says my health's good, but I hear the caution in his voice. At 73, time becomes real, not urgent, but limited. So I've started writing letters. Not to David, not yet, but to the others, to Jake, explaining the lineage of each tool, to the historical society, outlining the life we lived here. So they'll know. David will get a letter too, not an apology, not a defense, just an attempt at clarity. It begins. Love without respect becomes obligation. Success without connection becomes loneliness. It's unfinished, like the relationship it addresses. Yesterday I passed David's old elementary school. It's being demolished. The playground where he once fell from the monkey bars is now weeds. Another piece of history fading. It reminded me, some things end, even when we think they'll last. But the lake is still here. Every morning, the same reflection of sky and water, same rhythm, indifferent to human failures. That's comforting in a way. Later today, Jake will help me move furniture for the Historical Society. He wants to learn more about joinery. I told him, modern methods are fast, but fast isn't always better. Like families? He asked. Yes, I said. Like families. I think more about time now, not in years, but in what's left to do. Time to finish the letters, time to see the museum open, time to sit by the lake and watch ducks learn to fly. Margaret would approve of these plans. She always believed in making the best of what remained. We can't control what others choose, she'd say, only how we respond. So, this is my response. Grace, clarity, letting go without bitterness. I'm grateful for the years we had with David, the boy who once helped me build a treehouse and a jewelry box. I don't hate the man he became. I just accept that he's not someone who wants what I have to give. The phone rings, but I don't rush to answer. If it's important, they'll call back. If it's David, we've said all we needed to. The lake stretches wide and quiet. Somewhere on the far shore, other families wrestle with the same story in different forms. Some will hold together, some will fracture. All will eventually learn. Love without respect becomes hollow. Family needs more than names and blood, and sometimes letting go is the kindest thing you can do. The sun burns away the mist. The lake gleams. Some things endure, others simply end. Both are necessary.